Hello, my name's Becky Safe. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to make kick drums for electronic music. And we're also going to deep dive into the plugin Kick 2, which is an incredible piece of software where you can synthesize and make your own kick drums. As always, the timestamps are below in the description so that you can skip back and forth to your favorite section. And firstly, I'm going to go into the anatomy of the drum and just talk a little bit about acoustic drums and breaks, which are commonly used in electronic music. So here in Ableton, we have the think break. Now, a lot of people will just take a break and stick it into the track, and that's it. The entire drum break is your drum section. So this is the think break, and you'll have heard this before in loads of tracks. And there's nothing to stop you from taking that break and putting it into your piece of music and leaving it as your drum section, maybe sticking some shakers and extra things on top to add to the already existing groove. And groove is really key with breaks, and this is why we use them in electronic music, because they have life, they have soul, and they have that crucial groove, which injects life into what can seemingly be a very rigid piece of music. If you're tracking your drums with MIDI notes and you're just having everything tied to the grid, then using breaks like this is a great way to put life and groove into your track. But if you stick it in just like that as it is, just bear in mind that you're then going to have to process this one entire track in its entirety, and this could throw off things like compressors because you've got lots of different instruments all existing in one track. And so sticking on processing on top of that, it's going to process all of these individual elements as if they were one, and that could really pose a lot of problems for controlling that track. So one thing that you could do is separate your drums out from this break. And to do that, you just isolate the kick drum. And now we just have a kick from the think break. And that has a lot of frequency content in there that still makes it sound acoustic and with a lot of human life. If we now use span to analyze the frequency content of this kick drum, we'll be able to talk through the different components of what makes up the kick from the think break. Okay, so this is the picture of the kick from the think break. And you'll see here that we have a main kind of bulk body, the thump of the drum, and we also have some high frequency content. And you can hear that when we play the drum, that it's not just made up of low frequency material, it's also made up of high frequency harmonic character, which at first thought you might not think that a kick drum would have high frequency material in there. But of course it does, because it makes up the character of the drum. And if we go back into this, we can see high frequency content, we can see the main body, but actually what is missing from this drum is the sub frequencies, the bass. There's no bass in this kick drum, and you can hear that. We just have low mids and the rest up to the highs. We don't actually have that punch of the sub fundamental coming through. So if we go down onto this kick sample here, and now we analyze this, and we can see this sample, which is electronically produced, has a huge sub-fundamental bump. It's also still got a lot of frequency content in that body section, and it has the high frequency content. And this is what we're looking for when we're designing a kick drum. Now, as drums are my main instrument, I absolutely love the anatomy of drums so much. I also have a sound design course where I teach you how to make your own kicks, snares, hi-hats, basses, leads, lots of things. So you can check that out below in the description as well. But this is my favorite topic. The kick drum. If you imagine you're about to hit a kick drum with the kick pedal, the first thing that is going to make a sound is the beater hitting the skin of the drum. And this is your high frequency content. This is the transient. It's a really short amount of time and it's high frequency. So that means it dissipates very quickly. Then you've got the body of the drum, which is that kind of low mid thump. And then you have the sub content, which is the big boomy section of your kick drum, and this is your fundamental. So the fundamental is the root note, and it's the pitch or the key of your drum. These are the three main sections that you're looking for when you're designing a kick drum. So we have all of those components present in this synthetic drum. We don't have that sub-frequency present in the Think kick, but we could introduce that, and I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later on using the Kick 2 plugin. So let's jump into Kick 2 and we're going to dive deep into this incredible masterpiece. So you've got your Kick 2 plugin, and the first thing you're going to see is this default window. You're also going to see in the top right your click, which will automatically be turned on. And if I press this track now and I mute this click, now what you're hearing is just in this window here. So we're going to talk about this window first. This is basically a sine wave generator. You've got lots of sine waves being generated and dissipating over time. Up the left-hand side is your pitch, so this is the frequency of your drum, and across the bottom is your length or time. This is how long the drum is. So when you move this slider up and down, you're actually changing the overall pitch of the drum. And when you move this slider to the left and the right, you're changing the length. If you go really far, you're starting to sound like an 808 bass because it's really elongated and long. You'll see in the window here that we have 4 nodes, and they all have a key next to them and a frequency which corresponds to that key. If you want to add in your own node, you just double click, and now we have one here. And in between these straight lines here, you could actually curve them by pressing Alt or Option, and you can curve so that the movement between this node and this node is a bit more smoother. Double click to get rid of the node, and now let's talk through what each of these nodes are actually doing. So on the left hand side first, this is the beginning part of your drum because this is the length from left to right. And so at the beginning here, this is your transient. This is where that high frequency beta hitting the skin of the drum is taking place. And it's starting at 20,000 hertz and it's going down to 480 hertz in a very short amount of time. If you want to see how much time that actually is, if you put your mouse over the node, you'll see in the top right corner, it's actually 0.0 seconds. If I drag this out up here in the top right, you'll now see it's 0.001 seconds. That's the amount of time that it's going to sonically produce from 20,000 hertz to 494 hertz. Bring that out and it increases the time in the top right corner, 0.004 seconds. So let's listen to what this transient sounds like when we bring this node over to the right. We're getting a much stronger and more present click because it's taking up more time on the kick drum. If we bring this up, we'll increase the frequency. Because remember, it's traveling from 20,000 down to this frequency here. So the more that you bring this up, the more it's actually staying in the upper frequencies. Likewise, this first node here, you might not want that at 20,000 hertz because it's very clicky and just doesn't sound real. So you can bring that down. And now we're starting to get the sound of a authentic acoustic beta on the kick drum. So that's the transient, and the next part of the drum is the thump, which is this section between 392 and 54-ish, around the low mids. So there's no definite rule, and it's totally up to you, but around the low mids, that's where you want to get that thump, that kind of secondary bump of your drum, in conjunction with the fundamental sub-frequency. So this is going to take up a lot less time than it does with the sub-frequencies, but you want to hover it around 300 to, I don't know, maybe like just above the sub-frequencies. And then between this point and this point, this is the time it takes to get down to the sub frequency. But it's also starting at 73 hertz, which is pretty low anyway. So this particular portion of the drum is going to be ringing out for the longest amount of time. And if you're tuning your kick to the key of your track, then you want your last node to be matching the fundamental of your project. So this is a G1. And we could go down to F1, and now this sub-frequency fundamental of this particular kick is in the key of F. You can shorten it as well. Remember these sliders on the X and Y axis. I like to keep the pitch one just as it is and control the pitch using the nodes in the window, but then you could also attenuate the length here across the bottom. There is a way to shape the amplitude using an amp envelope of this kick drum, and at the moment we've just been looking at the pitch window, but if we click here, we're now in the amp window, and this is the current shape of our drum. This is corresponding to the time, so if you hover over the nodes, you'll see in the top right corner 0.012 seconds, and so this node is corresponding to 0.012 seconds, which is there on the sine wave. So whatever is happening here in this frequency, so this is at around 100 hertz, this is where this node is corresponded to. So the volume of this particular section goes down a little bit and then it comes back up for the sub frequencies. So that's that main thump of the drum is down in volume, and also we're shaving off the transient because it's going from 0 up to 1. So this amplitude envelope is controlling really what you want the listener to hear the most of out of your drum. Do you want it to be the transient? Do you want it to be the thump? Or do you want it to be the sub frequencies? If we bring this over to the left, we've now got 100% transient present. And you can hear that by that clicky knock. And you might not want that. You might want to bring that over to the right. You might also want to have more of the thump in your drum, but less of the sub. So that's starting to sound really acoustic. It actually sounds a lot like that think kick now, because you've just got that main thump and no sub. Now it's starting to sound like an 808 kick, where the bass sub-frequencies are being drawn out for a longer period of time. And now you pretty much have a 808 bass. Up to the top of the window here, and you have curve preset, and this is where you can save your amp curves. So if you ever create a curve on the amp envelope and you want to save it, then you can save it in here, and you press save and reset, undo, redo, and then you have gate, snap, and tag. So the first one is corresponding to the length of the MIDI notes. So if you want your kick drum to be just default whatever length you set in here, then you have this disabled. But if you enable it, now your kick drum is going to correspond to the length of your MIDI notes. Snap is so that you can snap these nodes in the screen here to an exact pitch. You can see that it's moving B2 to C3 to C sharp 3, and it's going to the exact frequency of those notes. But if you don't want that, disable it. You now have the ability to free move in between the exact frequency of those notes. I like to keep it on snap so that I know that I'm definitely in the key. And tags is just showing you the information on the nodes, which is good to have enabled. You have sub view, which is displaying the sub in this window here. It comes from down the bottom on the sub control. If you disable that, you lose your sine wave view. You also have click view for the 3 clicks down the right hand side, and you can see this first click, which is loaded in, click 12, actually appears here in yellow. If we zoom in and come over, you can see that the click is there present, adding as an additional transient to our kick drum. So we might want to have a click and go into the amp envelope and shave off the amp envelope so that this click comes through and is the most present transient in the mix. So as I've just mentioned, this is your sine wave sub that is displayed in the main window in the sub view, and this is controlled down here in the sub control. And you can change the wavetable down here. So you don't just have to have a sine wave. You could have something else, like a square wave. At the moment, it's not actually coming through because you need to increase the harmonics. And then you could cycle through your waves. And you can increase the pitch as well. Although I personally don't like to do it from there, because why would you do it from there? You've got your pitch controls in here. Maybe there's a reason. Let me know in the comments, but I'm probably just going to carry on doing the pitch in the main window using the nodes. Also, you can change the frequency harmonic content of your drum by dragging up and down, similar to what it looks like in Vital and in Serum. You could start to increase your harmonic content in here, dragging these sliders up and down. On all of these samplers down the side for the clicks and the subcontrol, you have key tracking, you have invert phase, you have mute, and you have solo. So let's jump up to the click, this original click that we muted. We're now going to introduce it back into the mix. You have your volume slider and a pan control as well. Double click them to reset them. And if we enable our click view so we can see what we're working with, and we'll zoom in and drag over, we now have the ability to change the length of our transient or click. We also have the ability to increase the pitch. So if you wanted it to match the style of your drum more, then you would attenuate using the pitch control. You can also change the start position of your click. And you have a low pass and high pass filter. So you might want to create a high pass with this because you don't want any of this click to be present in the sub frequency. Each of your clicks has an amplitude envelope similar to the amplitude of, well, exactly the same as the amplitude of the pitch envelope, and you click them down here where it says click, and you can change the amplitude. So if you wanted this sound to fade out a little bit more, you could insert nodes in exactly the same way. So you're changing the amplitude by shaping the envelope of your click. And in the drop-down menu at the top here, you can also load in different clicks, and Kick 2 comes with its own set of clicks. So you could cycle through by clicking in the category and going down the drop-down menu here, and you can see it's changing the click, or you could just cycle across. So you're getting a different transient, a different characteristic of your kick by cycling through the clicks there that are preset in Kick 2. But you can also introduce your own kick. And this is where I have thought about introducing the acoustic characteristics of the think break kick, because it doesn't have that sub-frequency content. We could also get rid of the lower frequencies by using the high pass filter, but we can load it into this kick sample engine by pressing load and going to our folder where I have saved the think break kick. If I open that up, and now we have the kick drum. And it sounds like the think break kick, but if we use span, we have our sub-frequency content, the low frequency that wasn't originally present in our original think break kick drum. So this is a great way to introduce those acoustic characteristics of the breaks that we all know and love in drum and bass especially, but all genres of electronic music. And by saving those samples and putting them into Kick 2, you now have your own kick drum that you can then shape using the amplitude envelope and layering it with the characteristics of the drums that we all know and love. The signal pathway of this VST is that it goes from whatever is in this window through the EQ, through the distortion, the drive, the compressor, and then out through the master limiter, which is an infinite to 1 ratio. So down on the EQ, obviously this is, if you know about EQ, then this is just shaping the EQ of your drum, and it's kind of like the final processing on top. You can activate it and deactivate all of these controls by pressing the blue light. By default, these two are on. You also have a parametric window so that you can attenuate your EQ inside this window. So you can really attenuate your kick drum using a visual EQ aid there by pressing edit. Distortion is automatically on, and you can select different waves. So if you wanted tube distortion, you could increase the amount here. You have a dry wet control, so if you don't want too much, but you want to increase the distortion amount, but just slightly 10% on the dry wet. You also have a high pass filter and a low pass filter. And you also have drive over here, so if you wanted to increase the drive, you're getting that very distorted sound. Activate the compressor, bring down the threshold so that you have some gain reduction. Bring up the ratio. The higher you go on the ratio, the more compression you're going to have, and you could increase the attack so that you're not shaving off that transient in the beginning, and then as you're reducing the dynamics, you could increase the makeup gain. By increasing the release, you're engaging the compressor for a longer period of time, which means it's controlling the entirety of the length of that drum. But just be careful not to increase it too much, because you want your compressor to deactivate by the time the next kick drum is coming in. And finally, your limiter over on the right here, if you bring this down, at the moment it's on 0 dB, but if you bring it down, then you're going to reduce the volume of your drum. And you can see the gain reduction coming into play on the limiter there. Once you've got that, you can go into save as, and you can save your preset in your user presets. And then you can always come back to your own library of kick drums. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you got something out of it, please spare 2 seconds of your life to press the like button, to drop a comment below. It boosts the YouTube algorithm. It gets my videos out there so that I can make more content for you guys. And if you really did enjoy this video, then please consider hitting the subscribe button and joining the family. The links to all of my socials and all the info that you'll need to find out about my courses and where you can get this plugin from as well are below in the description. And until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you for another video. Bye!